President Biden is in Brussels ahead of the NATO summit on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So far, more than 3.6 million refugees have fled Ukraine since the war began 27 days ago. Poland has received more than 2 million of them. For more on President Biden's trip to Europe, let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who is on the ground in Brussels. Ed, what will be the president's main goal in the NATO summit on Thursday?
Well, Bob, good to see you. Hello from the capital of European diplomacy, where on Thursday the president's actually set to attend 3 separate meetings with European leaders. The big one is the meeting with NATO. Then he'll also meet with leaders of the G7 and with the European Council. All of these meetings designed to talk about the next steps regarding the crisis in Ukraine and how exactly Europe, the United States, and other democracies around the world will continue to respond with economic and military action. The president is expected to focus, among other things, on a new round of sanctions. CBS News has learned that it's likely going to target members of the Russian parliament, and they will also announce tougher enforcement actions on the previous sanctions that are already in place in hopes that those that are being targeted won't evade the sanctions. Beyond that, expect to hear more conversation about potential humanitarian and military assistance to Ukraine specifically. We spoke today to Ukraine's top envoy to NATO. Remember, Ukraine isn't a member of the military alliance or the European Union, but it keeps an office here in Brussels to monitor things with the military alliance. And the ambassador previewed a bit of what President Zelensky is expected to tell world leaders in a meeting. We also asked her about the ongoing ceasefire negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. Here's a little bit of what she told us.
Very good question, frankly speaking. I wish we should be more close, but in fact, during the negotiations, Russians are putting on the table so many demands, and it's sometimes even difficult to understand what does this demand mean. Like, for example, they are saying that Ukraine should be denazified. I mean, what does that mean? We don't have any Nazi or something similar organization in Ukraine. So what is under this term? Or something like Ukraine should be demilitarized. And I would like to point out that the armed forces is the actually is the only source of our security guarantees right now, and that Ukraine is capable to encounter the second largest army in the world. I think this is actually the service of the armed forces of Ukraine, and we do believe in their capacity. So to be left without armed forces at all, I'm afraid it would be the end of Ukraine.
The ambassador told us that Ukraine is anticipating word of more military assistance to the country. And she said that President Zelensky, when he addresses the world leaders, similar to how he's been doing to world parliaments and the U.S. Congress last week, is expected to be pretty blunt with them and say, look, you may have bureaucracies and traditions in NATO that can slow things down because of the rules about coming to consensus before committing troops or money or assistance to different countries. You've got to act faster to help Ukraine, because ultimately, this is a conflict that's likely to extend beyond Ukraine's borders, certainly if not with traditional military action, then with cyber attacks and the ongoing economic ripple effects that are being felt across the continent and around the world. After the president's here in Brussels, he will head next to Poland on Friday. He's set to meet with that country's president and give a big speech on how the free world, as the White House puts it, is responding to the crisis in Ukraine. It's also likely the president's going to meet with some of the more than 2 million refugees who have fled Ukraine into Poland, that country on Ukraine's western border, of course, bearing the brunt. But the president, who likes to talk about how he prefers face-to-face interactions with world leaders instead of the virtual calls he's been having, is set to spend plenty of time with many of them on Thursday here in Brussels. A big day of global diplomacy for the president. Bob?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And a programming note, President Biden is expected to hold a press briefing from the NATO headquarters in Brussels following the G7 and NATO summit tomorrow afternoon. That's set to get underway at 3 p.m. Eastern on Thursday. We will carry his address in full, and you can stream that right here on CBS News.